All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting order for the Wells Springs Unified Union School District regular board meeting for November 13th. We will begin with the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the order of business is to approve the agenda. A motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion. Nope, sorry.
Motion by George. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. General public comment. Is there anyone tonight who wishes to speak? All right. Another opportunity later. All right. We're on to legislative discussion. So tonight we have Senator Terry Williams here with us tonight to engage in a conversation about priorities and potentially coming legislation. And
sorry.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm on the Education Committee. Senator Dave Weeks, also voluntary senator, wasn't able to make it tonight because he's getting ready to travel a lot of country. So I really don't have a lot to tell you because a wise man once told me that you don't know anything, you better off just say I don't know. So I can tell you that there's a lot of misinformation out there about what's going on in the legislature. I don't even know if I'm going to be back on the Education Committee again. But so where we left off in May is about what I know. I've heard as far as education funding, I know the tax commissioner is going to announce the treasurer will announce the education tax rate next month. And that means that everybody's going to go into a discussion about what they can afford, what they can afford. Last year it started out at 18.5%, and with the yield bill they cut it back to 13.5. I've heard a number of figures thrown around from joint fiscal about the I don't get an impression it's going to be better next year. I'm hearing anywhere from 70 million to I've heard $170 million hole in the education funding. And there's a lot of committees that are going on right now. There's state aid to school construction discussion, a work group. They're still finalizing, I think, the PCB. I haven't heard a final report back from where we stand on that. That could affect funding. And basically, that's about what I know right now. I think I'm here. I've been to a couple different school board meetings, and I think the prudent thing that everybody's doing is that expect the worst and hope for the best, whatever that might be. And which means that if it's going to be painful, we should share the pain at every level. Unfortunately, I don't have any control over the budget at the state level, but because the state education budget is based on spending statewide. So, like the Burlington high school, that's costing all of us money. And and we're also taking out of that education budget is the Vermont State University's funding. So there's a lot of different variables that come into it that most people don't understand. I'm trying to get up to where I can understand at the state level how they fund, from what comes from the general fund, what comes from the Vermont lottery, And I'm not on any of the money committees. I'm not on the finance or the appropriation committee. So basically what the education committee does is we set policy for, we listen to teachers, we listen to the union, we listen to the school board. And I'll just leave it with that and open up to any questions you like. If you have a specific question, I'd be able to answer it.
Good question.
Carrie, I know that you met with Saunders at the 15th Century Saunders a few months ago. Is there anything that you want to share with the group, or anything that you think is important out of that meeting? You know.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lot of involvement.
Sure.
It's her listening and learn to her that she's doing. I think when she's done with it, she's going to take all the feedback that she gets from. I think she's got 8 different locations that she's going statewide. Once she gets that, she'll get with her agency of education. They'll come up with a vision for education in Vermont. And then once that vision is established, they'll come up with a strategic plan. Unfortunately, it may not be before the beginning of the next legislative session. Right. So, but I think that she's taken a realistic look. Everybody is bracing for, what do we do now? You know, property taxes are going to go up. People aren't going to be happy. That's just a reality. And I'll give you an example. Act 127 that caused all the funding issues last year, that was finalized in 2022.
Right. And
so the people that are in the legislature right now may not even have anything to do with their action.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's a flaw in the system. There's some other budgetary issues that I'm aware of and trying to work. But that's about it. I think she's got a good handle on it. I was impressed with her discussion and the breakout session.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, so I was there too for that listen and learn, and I think one of I don't know if you saw when you walked out, they had the posters and stuff on the doors. You read through, there was a lot of them that said like no unfunded mandates. Right. And that was like a huge part. And there, they gave you stickers to put on there. And there were a lot of stickers on all of those. So I think, looking at, like the next upcoming legislative session and probably some of the future ones down the road, I think that's a huge thing that I'm looking at and being aware of is, some of these bills that come through that, just keep adding on to the tax bill, I guess, and increasing the costs. And I kind of think that's a priority from my perspective. I don't know if anyone else has any other insight, but I don't know exactly how, and I know you mentioned that the education committee, sets policy, but, I think when, some of these, bills come through the education committee, is that part of the process is to look at those and see like, well, how are schools or districts going to pay for this too?
Right. There's 2 parts to that too. There's a state education tax rate, and then there's a local too. And we have an advantage of having our joint fiscal office that works for the legislature. So if we want to know what something is going to cost, we can tell JFO that we want them to come in and talk specifically to that issue. And they've always been pretty much upfront. But that unfunded mandates was a big deal.
All right, so if no one else has any, I have a number of coworkers. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I have a number of coworkers, and we're all pretty much into the school. I sat down with them today, and I told them that I would be meeting with you guys and asked them if they had questions. I work in the Rutland City School District, and how much are you guys involved with ever even walking through the school to see what goes on with them?
You guys be in the legislature.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I won't make excuses, but I have been going to school board meetings,
Mhm.
and it's more helpful when I get invited and tell specifically what you're looking for. I've never been to this school. I didn't ask to be put on the education committee, and I had no education experience. I sent my kids to school because I didn't want to have to teach them myself, because I wasn't capable of doing it. So, and my hat's off to all the educators and the administrators. Yeah, and I think, and I'll take a hit. It's the legislature's problem.
And let me say congratulations on both your guys' wedding,
Yes.
and
Yep.
I'm sorry you had that job because it's probably just as unthankful as everything
It
else
is.
for
Yep.
public service thing.
Yep.
But
But I don't care. I mean, I took the job because I didn't take it because I was going to make a lot of money. I took it because I wanted to get involved. I want to make a difference. But when the people stand up and tell me what their priorities are and what their issues are, then I got something to go back with. And, I can't go to every school in the district. I can, right? I mean, we got 27 towns. Rutland Town, Rutland City, and then we've got the approved independent schools too. I'm trying to get out in between dealing with other issues. Every senator's on 2 different committees. I'm on education and health and welfare, and they occasionally cross over. So those are both good committees to be on, because a lot of health and welfare, mental health issues apply to schools. And I wouldn't be aware of that unless I was on that committee.
well, I asked them for some of the things in the school that I understand that a lot of it should be administrative policies and stuff like that for schools. But you guys mandate things and stuff like that, and the unfunded mandates and stuff. I get that. And I get a lot of the things that policies were made that don't affect you because you never made them. They're just things. Are you guys capable of changing some of those policies that were made before you were sitting on the board for this?
Yep.
So you guys can actually change something that was mandated in 2020?
If it was a legislative action that came out as an act,
Okay.
yeah, anybody can come to any of their elected representative or senator and say, I want you to put in a bill to repeal this section of this statute.
Now, has anybody ever came and said, no child left behind to change that?
No, nobody's ever said
Okay.
that to me.
That was a discussion today that we had, that when that policy was made and that act was done, it was a different set of rules. Kids were different. Nowadays we have, instead of that, maybe 5 or 6 kids throughout a school, even this size, 5 or 6 kids, that was a lot. Now, because the way things are and have been over the years, that no child left behind is enacting like tons of kids. It's like more like 20, 30 per class. And Rutland City's seeing a pretty big hit on that. And these kids are disruptive.
Mhm.
They are unbelievable in every possible way you can possibly imagine. I'm a school bus driver and I'm in the schools on a daily basis doing maintenance. I see this. These kids need to be in school on their own. Putting them in a regular classroom is screwing up the regular kids. And it's not that I don't feel bad for these kids, and I understand a lot of the social issues that go with that. But they need to be out of the school and in their own school. Is that something that even would be considered as and looked at into?
Well, I don't think it would get a lot of support. I think that I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. That's part of the problem with schools is disruptive students. I hear it from elementary school, pre-K. They have kids that show up, they haven't even been in potty trained, and a lot of that gets put on to the teacher, on the educators. And I've listened to different Zoom meetings. We actually had 3 teachers, one from Bennington, one from Pulaski, and one from Fairhaven, complaining about, the additional duties that are put on to the educators. And this was my first meeting with the and I said to them, "You guys in the union?" And they all acknowledged that they were. And I said, "Well, where's the union in all this? Why aren't they helping you guys out? Why?" And the union representative was sitting across the table from me, and he raised his hand. I hadn't met him yet.
Well,
So A lot of that stuff has to do with, the union.
Okay, so you're looking at Rutland City's chapter chair. And I'll tell you right now, we would like to get it changed, but we can't even get the board to listen to us to do a change on this.
But we can put a bill in.
Yeah. So it's like, they're sick of this and these kids really need to be, I understand it. But not only is the child left behind laws really screwing up the school system, it's costing a fortune. When if you put them in their own school, you'd still be sending, the group that we had today said they didn't mind the spending, but the destruction of the good students that are there for a purpose and the other ones that have that social issues or just physical issues.
Yep. That's a common thing. I've heard a lot.
So if you're getting it from the union, where's the problem if we can't get it changed in the lower part?
And I don't want to just blame the union. I
Oh.
mean, but that's a policy that was, I'm not even familiar with all the aspects of, child left behind, but, when the state got out of, they closed a lot of those schools where they could have gone. What's the expense going to be?
It's a federal program. It's not a state program.
True.
Yeah.
So there's nothing the state can
It's a
really do
federal-
about it.
George, you had a question?
Oh, it's just a statement. I mean, thank you again for coming, and I remember you going to Greater Rutland last year and expressing your frustration at not being listened to.
Yep.
You represent us. We kind of also represent you.
Yep.
And if your voice is not being heard, and we have open lines of communication, I hope anything we can do to make sure you get heard, rattle some chains or something. And whether you're on the education committee or not, you're going to be voting on these bills. And if you can let us know where you stand on it, perhaps we can work together.
So Weeks and I both asked to be put back on the education committee.
Okay.
So the likelihood, and I heard this when I first got in, the likelihood they're going to put two senators from the same county on the same committee is unlikely. And we ended up on two committees, and the whole day we spend sitting across the table from each other. So I'm getting so I can read his mind and he can read mine. So hopefully both of us can stay on that committee. Because I think it's an important committee and we got some problems. We gotta fix them.
When will you know?
Probably January. We get to put our wish list out. But there's a lot of the leadership in the political arena is changing. Speaker of the House is being challenged. The pro tem may get a challenge. The committee on committees, some of those people didn't get reelected.
Yep.
Some of them retired. So I just take a wait and see attitude, and we wait till January and we're already into the session before we really know what we're going to be doing. In the meantime, I'm going out. I am talking, engaging people about every issue. I got a call yesterday from the mayor's office in Rutland. One of my constituents came to him, wanted to talk to me about the homeless situation in Rutland.
Since you brought that up,
Yep,
is the voucher system going to end for the homeless?
Right. He gave me the phone number and I called the individual. He said, I didn't talk to the mayor. He said, maybe somebody else used my phone. Next thing you know, I started getting, my phone is being flooded with calls from people that got booted off the voucher system. So, and I have sympathy and empathy. I really feel for these people, but I'm just a cog in the wheel. I have a voice, your voice. So the more that you people come to me and tell me what you want me to do, that gives me direction. And then I can say, I'd honestly say, I've never put a bill in that was a bill I wanted in. It was always from constituent. And then I can say, not my bill, it's their bill. And they want this fixed.
Well, on a daily basis, because I drive a school bus and I get those hotels, I lost sympathy a long time ago for the adults. I have total sympathy for the kids that have to live in those conditions, but the parents are horrible. And I can't do anything about it when I have to drop a kid off to a parent that's strung out, that is laying across the road, just kind of flopping around. I see that daily, every morning. First, my middle intermediate school pickup, It's at the Cortina.
Yep.
And
It's a societal problem.
Right.
And I don't know how you fix that. I mean, my kids all
Well,
turn
you
out
know,
okay and they're
I,
all still here living in Vermont,
I
working
do,
every
I
day.
agree. So are mine, but
Yep. And they're all
when
good
we have
students.
a drug house and we're offering free clinics for them to go and shoot themselves up. I also work with
I
stores.
voted against that bill.
Thank you, thank
Yep.
you. But I work with stores and we can't open our public bathroom unless we have a needle dispensary available in the bathroom. That is ridiculous, that we can't even have a bathroom unless we have a needle dispensary in there. And more than once I've called because I got a 14-year-old locked in the bathroom, strung out or overdosing. So,
It's a common thing. I hear it all the time, you know. I've talked to the state's attorney. Why don't we just enforce the laws that are on the books? We don't have enough enforcement people.
but the ones we do have can do it if they're allowed to do it.
Well, and then you talk to those people and they say, why do we even bother? Because they won't prosecute it.
Well,
So
there we
that's,
go. So you know where that is.
So I'm with you. I mean, I'm a taxpayer too. I see it every day. I hear about it and it's sad. So.
I think with all the issues surrounding education and I think more folks are going to be paying attention a lot more closely and probably advocating a lot more. So,
yeah.
I mean, what would you say would be the best way to just directly reach out?
I'll give you a card. I've got cards here. I'll give you a card at the end of this, and if anybody wants, I don't have a problem. You can call my home, you can call my cell phone.
I work with 40 people. I guarantee you, if I give them that, they'd be on you.
Yep. Well, I mean, that's my job.
For.
Yeah, and I have to. I mean, I'll be honest. I have to pick and choose what I work on because I've got so many. I'm inundated. And it's not a part-time job.
No, it's
It's just like the school board. You don't
school
get
board's
paid.
supposed to be a part-time job.
Right,
I've
right.
spent a number of years and it's not. To do it right, you gotta be on it all the time.
Matt, Amanda, did you guys? Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, did you?
No, go ahead if you wanna.
Do you have something you wanted to say? If not, that's.
No, I'm enjoying this conversation, so thank you.
I just wanted to, I know it's sort of old news, but last year with the budget mess, our supervisory union, our Wellspring district, what did we have, a 6% increase?
4.5.
4.5% increase. We were able to do that without taking advantage and crying that, oh, we ran out of ESSER funds, so now we have to eliminate 2 of our new 10 positions. We never used the ESSER funds. Lewis made sure we never used the ESSER funds without knowing they were going to go away. We didn't create new positions. And we all end up getting nothing out of the advantage of the new weighting system, which was supposed to help small schools.
Yep.
And instead, it all fixed so that the districts that overspent got the advantage. They didn't, and it was really, really
Their budget's
frustrating.
all passed too.
Our budget's fast, but just barely, and all the negative publicity made it so that it just passed.
Right.
And I mean, we tried to stand up and say 4.5% increase here, she should pass our budget. But all we heard from Phil Scott and others was, don't pass the budgets. Make sure you look at them. Make sure, and it's super, super frustrating when we have administrators working as hard as they have, and we have cut and cut and cut. And we're we're a choice district, so we don't have a whole lot of options besides these 2 small schools.
I heard the same thing from Slade Valley.
Of course.
You know what? They couldn't get their budget. They couldn't get their budget to pass.
And they
Yet-
should have been able to.
Yet we're the lowest spending district in the whole state.
And it's all rhetoric
Right.
coming from the top.
And I won't say I understand the education funding formula. You wouldn't want me balancing your checkbook, but this yield bill was passed, and the weighting was to get advantage for the poorest counties, Rutland and Bennington counties. And, you know, the more, and I heard it from a couple different school boards that we're one of the lowest spending, and yet they expect us to do more. And message received, I hear you. And if the more you do with less, the more you do better with less, the more they want you to.
And I'll have to say, I respect this group for doing what they did on some of their budgeting. But I see Rutland City, they spend it like it's candy.
Yep.
It is unreal, and I can't believe it passed. But I looked at their budgets and I look over their things as well, just being interested in working there. But that is unreal what they spend, and they're allowed to do it, and they're getting away with it. And I question some of the places where the money's going too, because they change systems and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how that passes, but is there any possible way that you guys can somehow look at that?
I think they're gonna be looking really hard at the education funding formula again.
Because
And
those guys, I mean, they spent tons on what they call their outdoor classrooms, which is just a pavilion. And some of it's just a tent pitched on a fancy metal pipe with stonework. And it's unreal. I mean, that was ESSER funds and some other places that they spent money that was ungodly real. But they have like 12 different places of schools, and they don't have enough kids to do what they're doing, and they're still getting away with the spending.
Right.
That school, by all means, should have some issues looked at. And I think it's gonna have to be the state looking at them, because they obviously are not controlling some things.
so I made the statement a couple of times in the education committee to the chairman Campion. I said, it seems to me that, our trouble started back in '79 when they passed Act 60. And they had to pass Act 68 to straighten out Act 60. And it's like building a house on a crooked foundation. It was supposed to be better. It was supposed to be more equitable. As a matter of fact, it was the Equity in Education Act. And same with Act 46. It was supposed to save us money. It never did. I mean, different people can point to different ways that it could, and then inflation and insurance going up. There are a million excuses out there. That's what I think Interim Secretary Saunders is looking at, the whole process and where we can make it better funding wise. So, and I can't speak for her, but I'm going to do everything I can, regardless of whether I'm on the education committee or not, to listen to you people, because you're on the tip of the spear here.
Well, I think the cities need to be looked at, not only Rutland, but Burlington.
Oh, yeah.
The outer communities are doing much better at what they doing the education part than the cities are. And we're getting screwed because of this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Anyone else have any final questions? Just want to point out we have Chris Pritchard here tonight as well, joining in, and didn't invite him, but welcome. And
Glad you're here.
I bet you'll be on the education committee.
I just want to start getting involved. I know little about this. My wife was a teacher for 40 years in the district that I'm in. She taught in Wells for 15 or 16 years and then went to Meadowy. So I hear some stuff. I understand stuff. But I just want to be a conduit for you folks. Is like Terry said, I want to go there and bring your voice. I don't have any agenda on anything. The reason I got into this is I just want to help the people. That's what I want to do. And so I'm going to reach out to all the school boards. I'm going to reach out to the select boards. I'm going to reach out to the planning commissions. I'm hopefully going to try to do it before January. I don't know if I will or not. And just get information. And once, I'm going to have orientation start next Tuesday. I'll be in Montpelier for 3 days, and I'll get assigned my email and stuff and reach out and send it to you folks and help you any way I can help you.
all right. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you both.
Yeah.
All right.
So one last thing, I used to be able to use the excuse, I'm just a freshman senator, and I really don't know what I don't know. but now I can't use that anymore because I'm not a freshman. So I have some ideas. Anybody wants to talk to me about their ideas?
Will do. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both again. All right, we're gonna move on to consent agenda. We have the minutes from October 9th and warrant 368 and 370. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mary. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Amendments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, on to finance.
So if there's any questions on the monthly reports, we can do that first, otherwise we'll move into the top right.
I just had one question about the accounts payable. I don't know if you. It was just the control technologies. There was two invoices with different numbers coming up with at 99.1. It could be different months. I just want to make sure that it wasn't.
I mean, I could definitely look into to get more specifics, but we
Okay.
have both schools use control technologies for their heating.
Right, so it says
Control.
monthly service for Middletown, monthly service for Middletown. It's just two different invoices with the same number, so it's let me see.
Okay, I can look at that throughout the meeting too. and get
Okay,
back
cool,
to you.
thank you, yep.
Could just be 2 months for processing.
Sure.
I want to say that there was, I think we had received a couple of bills. Yes,
Right.
I think that's what it is. But we also did have them come in to, look at the boiler. But I think that was, I don't know if that would have been listed different as a different invoice description.
Okay,
So
so,
we've had them in a few times this year to look at different things.
and then the only other one was the presidential waters. We're doing another water test for 300, so I was just wondering, we've talked about this before. Might just be something monthly, but just that cost came up in the last couple of discussions.
Yep, that is I believe it is a monthly charge or a quarterly charge. On the control technologies too, if you look at the second column in, it gives an invoice number.
Yep.
And so they are different invoice numbers for
Okay.
each of those things. So
Sure.
it's probably 2 separate months and there was just playing catch up.
Okay, great, thank you. And then
It
will that
is.
be
I
recurring?
I have the
monthly?
same question.
Yeah, monthly fee for the water testing, do you know, Corey, or?
So I do know that we have Dennis come in and test monthly. I'm not sure if he bills us monthly or if he bills us quarterly, like
Okay,
Lois was
okay,
saying,
great.
but he does come test monthly, so it's possible that it's a monthly bill.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, and well, those two control techs, I had the same question for, yeah, for Kathy and they're 2 separate months.
Okay,
Just to answer your
Mhm.
question.
just make sure.
Okay. So Chris is gonna share a document that we've created, that we're sharing with boards, it goes through some of the factors that are impacting our budgets, locally. So as you all probably know, I mean, there's 2 steps to the budget process. There's what we do here in this room, which is setting our budget, and looking at all the things that impact our budget for Well Springs. And then once that piece is done, the next step is then looking at those outside factors that are going to impact the tax rate. Tonight, we're just going to talk about what's impacting our budget. In December and January, we'll start talking about those factors that are impacting the tax rate. And those are all those outside state factors like the pupil weighting, the CLA, the yield. Those factors don't start coming to us until December 1st is usually the first one with the tax commissioner's letter. And then after that, we wait for the weighted pupil number. The yield is, we get an estimate with the tax commissioner, but we don't get the actual final one until later in the legislative session. And then the CLA usually comes out in late December.
And like Louis said, this is in response to, we receive a lot of questions during budget time, really about the budget. How is the budget formed? Who has access to this? There's, Senator Williams said there's a lot of miscommunication during budget season. So what we wanted to do was just, provide a short, brief presentation, just so people understand that, as Louis said, things that impact the budget, the tax rates, and as we look through. So we've distilled this down to 6 main areas, which is personnel costs, statewide health insurance, inflation, special education costs, facility repairs and school construction, as well as tuition, for particularly impacts, Wells Springs. So each of these areas do greatly influence our budget. So when we look at the budget breakdown, Louis,
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit?
So personnel is definitely one of the largest areas in our budget. And when we look at this pie chart, this only is looking at the personnel costs that are directly in the Wells Springs budget. But if you're on the GRCSU committee, parts of the personnel costs are also in the GRCSU budget, which are in other pieces of the pie in our budget. So personnel costs are impacting a few different pieces of this pie. So looking at the budget breakdown for Wells Springs, you have personnel costs at 40.7%. And that includes all salary and benefits for employees of the Wells Springs School District. Tuition is the next biggest piece of the pie, and that's for secondary tuitions, where we're tuitioning out students for grades 7 through 12. If you were a non-choice town, you would definitely see that personnel costs would be a larger piece of your budget because you wouldn't have that tuition cost. The next biggest piece of the pie is the assessments. These are the costs that are coming to Wells Springs based on a metric from the SU. So there's 2 pieces of the SU budget. There's the central office assessment, and then there's the special ed assessment. Each one of those are being allocated to Wells Springs based on either ADM or special ed IEP counts. And the SU budget is a large percentage personnel cost as well. The next biggest piece of the pie is, actually, I'll come back to that one. So the next one I'll touch on is the SU purchase services. These are services that the SU is providing directly to Wells Springs, but they're in the GRCSU budget. And the reason for that is we have some positions that are partially grant funded. So like both Wells and Middletown have a interventionist whose a portion of their salary is funded through the CFP, which is the Consolidated Federal Programs Grant. So Wells receives 25% funding for that, or actually 30%. Middletown receives 25%. In order to have those positions funded through that grant, they need to be SU employees. And then the portion that's not grant funded is billed back directly to Wells Springs. There's also other purchase services that you get from the SU, such as substitutes. We run the substitute program through the SU just because it's easier, it's more efficient to run it as one program. And then we bill it back to Wells Springs based on how many sub hours that you've used. The difference between an assessment and a bill back is that a bill back is billed to you based on direct services that you're receiving. It's not based on a metric. Whereas an assessment is based on it's an allocation based on a metric like a percentage of ADM versus the whole ADM in supervisory. The next piece is transportation. This is for busing of your students to and from school, as well as any sports activities or field trips or stuff like that. Currently only Wells transports students to and from school. Middletown does not provide transportation except for field trips. Food service, this is run through a separate fund. It's called an enterprise fund. And then the net cost of that program is a subsidy in your budget. So again, most of the food service, or a great portion of the food service program, is personnel cost. But you're only seeing that just a one line item in your budget because it's actually mandated that it be run through an enterprise fund, and then it just shows up in your budget as one line item. And then the last category is just other, and then that's just a placeholder for all other expenses in your budget. It includes anything from supplies to professional development, repairs, fuel oil, electricity, everything that it takes to keep your building open and running. And that all falls into that other category, 7%.
It's kind of weird to group them together like that. I mean, it seems like it should be a facilities section, and I even question whether professional development should be part of personnel costs.
I'm sure there's definitely different ways you can make this pie and split it out.
Right, and well, the reason I think of facilities is because that seems to be an important
Yeah.
piece right now. And lumping it with professional development doesn't really come as clean as the other expenses in there.
And before we move on, I just want to let anyone who's viewing this online, we will be uploading a copy of this presentation to the budget website. So every district will have a budget website on GRCSU, but as well as on Middletown Springs and Wells Village Schools page. So I know if people are trying to write this down or get information, you'll have access to all this information tomorrow. We'll upload this. So we move into the impact of personnel costs, and as Lewis had talked about, this obviously is one of the largest drivers of a budget. And here in the GRCSU, the salaries are negotiated across the GRCSU. They're not negotiated individually within school or within districts. So these are collectively bargained. And currently, right now, we're getting ready to begin negotiations with our teachers and with our support staff. We are going to mediation. So obviously, though, what occurs, during the negotiations will impact our budgets, will impact the personnel costs. You can see here, obviously, through the graph. Lewis said, I spoke with them. He decided to break down because it is important that we hear this all the time from staff or someone when they look at they just look at what their take home pay. And they see that's it, but a school board actually, when they report to say they have to include benefits. So while an employee may have $60,000 in take-home pay, but if they say $35,000 of benefits, that's $95,000 that goes on the book in terms of a salary for staff. And so that's why we look at the VHI and we look at these double-digit increases has a pretty profound impact on our school budgets and what we're doing. So
Yeah, so benefits make up approximately 25% on average of the total compensation. So for every $100,000, $25,000 of that is benefits, including health insurance, dental.
But they look like they've been
taxes.
increasing.
So both personnel and benefits have been increasing. Definitely the biggest piece of benefits has been health insurance, and that has been increasing. We've seen 5 double-digit increases in the last 6 years. And health insurance can have a pretty large range depending on the plan that the employee picks. So it could be anywhere from for a teacher, $1,500 or $2,000 if they don't choose our health insurance and they get the buyback, anywhere to approximately $35,000 if they take a family plan. So when we're estimating the total compensation for a new teacher, the range could be pretty large just on the benefit piece. And so we kind of look at what the average is and sort of go in somewhere in the middle. But from year to year, as staff resign or retire or move on and we get new staff, if you're budgeting for one plan and someone signs up for another plan, it could have a significant impact on your budget.
And one thing I'll add, and you'll hear this being thrown out a lot, is around the class size. And I know I'm sure Senator Williams has heard a lot about this the past year, and Representative Pritchard over here and a lot about this as well too. But I think that's, as we look at as SU local boards, really what is that optimal class size, particularly how we staff our buildings, because that will impact the amount of personnel that we have employed. And so that those are discussions that we can have locally, but we do understand that the state will be taking this under consideration. And obviously I expect the Commission on Education to have some recommendations, whether it be in December of this year or the following year. But I do know that In the updated ed quality standards, which actually sets the maximum class size, those numbers have not changed in terms of maximum. But I do know that from what we've heard is that there'll be a lot of more scrutiny on in terms of the minimum as well as the optimal class size, particularly as we look at how we staff our buildings across the state of Vermont.
So we already touched on this a little bit, but, so the increase this year for health insurance is 11.9%. As I said, five of the last 6 years have been double digits. I think it's important to note, looking at this graph, this ups and downs is not, cumulative. This is just all new increases. So all of these are new increases on top of what our rates are. But if we were to look at the cost of health insurance cumulative, it would just be a straight, diagonal up.
Then, look at inflation, we talked about this before, but the impact that, the homeowner sees when they go to the grocery store, they pull into the gas station. Obviously, it's going to impact schools and districts as well. As we look at the cost to heat our schools, to feed our kids, in terms of lunch prices, supplies, as we go out to bid, or you look at work that needs to be done, we're seeing the same impact. And I know that it's something which we have to keep in mind, but the September 2024 CPI was at 3.4. Let's see what the October number is at, but it is important to take a look at it. And we'll look at the next charts. You can see that the trend over the past 4 years around CPI has been fluctuated, but it's we're now at that. They said 3.5, right around there. So it looks like we're going to have that's sort of. All right. Special ed funding, I'll let you tackle this one.
So special ed funding is all at the SU, so it's not directly in the West Springs budget. It's just indirectly as an assessment. We see typically an increase in special ed expenses every year, and this is one of the areas that we have limited control over because we have to maintain and stay in compliance with students' IEPs, and special ed expenses are impacted by all the other things that we've talked about already, with personnel and whether it be an internal or an external placement. A couple of years ago, the state did switch their funding model through Act 173. So prior to Act 173, all special ed costs were on a reimbursable model where we received approximately 55 cents in reimbursement for every dollar we spent. With Act 173, that went away, and we're now receive a flat block grant amount on a per pupil basis. So how much you're spending doesn't impact how much you're getting back in reimbursement. And part of that transition is it looks at those districts that were high spenders, they're losing funding in this transition, and those that were low spenders are receiving additional funding during this transition. Luckily, GRCSU was a low spender. So where the NEEP has increased approximately 3% a year over the last few years, we have been seeing our special ed funding increasing about 10% per year, because as we work towards, it was a 4-year transition, and as we work towards that new norm, because we were a low spender, we're seeing our revenue increase each year over those 4 years. FY26, which is the budget we're talking about tonight, and we approved at the last SU board meeting, was the last year of the Act 173 transition. So when we looked at when we look at FY27 budget year, we'll be looking at just those normal increases in the appropriations for special ed. So we won't have a 10% increase in our block grant anymore. We'll probably be looking at around 3%. So we'll see.
And what if the federal government decides to stop funding special education?
I don't think that's gonna happen.
That's not a very good idea.
That's not gonna happen.
I don't think it's not gonna happen.
They're gonna stop providing money for special education.
Our largest portion of funding is through the state appropriation.
Right.
That's what I wanted to know. What kind of an impact it
So
would
we
be.
do receive funding through both federal and state. The federal is the IDB grant that we receive, and that's approximately 800,000 a year. And it's all included in our special ed budget, but there's a separate process for that. It's an entitlement grant where we have to put through an application, sort of like our CFP, and we designate certain expenses towards that grant.
And that wouldn't be affecting our budget till like 27, if something like that were to happen.
Yeah, and it would be small. I mean, I know they've talked about CFP and IDB going down each year, but we haven't seen a huge change in it. The greatest portion of our funding is through the state appropriation. We receive in that in several different forms. We receive the census block grant. We receive a EEE grant, which is for our preschool kids. And then we also receive extraordinary reimbursement, which is for those students that are high needs and they're either in an internal or an external placement, but their costs exceed $66,000. We receive additional funding for those students.
From the state.
From the state, yes.
That's the difference I wanted to understand.
All right, as Meredith had talked about before, as we look at the pie charts, the next is around maintaining and improving our facilities. I know that George, we're seeing that, the facilities committee, Wells Village and Middletown Springs, just like any other school in the state of Vermont, obviously facility needs and upkeep and maintenance that we have to keep an eye on. One of the things that the state is very concerned about is just that, we have a lot of buildings that are starting to age out right around the same time. So we look at these projections, that the immediate facilities for the state in January 2024 is 228 million, or just a little north of 228 million. And then the estimated projections to actually estimate that might be undercounted is over $6 billion. And that's just a reality of just, what we're dealing with here. So obviously it's up to us to take a look at our 5-year capital improvement plan, just make sure we're on top, we're aware of where we need to be, and just outline some major repairs and improvements, and just keep the board apprised of this, and also develop a plan for as well. But that is a driver that if a boiler would go out, there's cost to replace a boiler in one of our schools, or if the roof would fail, there's a cost to replace the roof. So these are just, it's part and parcel of just operating these facilities. So, and last is around tuition costs. So
one of the largest pieces in your budget other than personnel is tuition costs. You tuition out approximately 50% of the residents, students in your 2 towns, grades 7 to 12. Parents have choice as to where they send their children. They can choose any public Vermont school, and we would pay up to the announced tuition rate for that school. So a school can set whatever rate they want. There is a reconciliation that's done at the end of each year called an all allowable tuition, but that is it's a separate piece. So you do have to pay whatever they set up front, and then potentially if they've overcharged or undercharged, there's going to be an additional adjustment. Parents also have the choice to send their students to any private school in the state or out of state, and they could also send them to a public school out of state. In those cases, we pay up to the state average, which is currently $19,774. In some cases, that amount is higher than the amount for public schools. In some cases, it's lower. It's really a case-by-case basis.
Do we have a number for Granville?
So Granville is, we haven't got next year's rate, but it's approximately in the 10,000 range.
So it's not above the state average.
Correct. So Granville is one of the outliers. It's always been a lot lower than the state average. And that is a out-of-state public school. We have also had in the past had kids go to Salem or Argyle, just a few here and there. And those schools have been typically a lot lower than the state average.
And so you have tuition comparables. Do these include all the schools that our students attend? I know you have some probably like Otter Valley where we don't have any students, but
no, this is just a, we did use this same slide for all of our districts, and this is just other schools in the Rutland area that we are competing with, and this is more towards when we're looking at what our rates are compared to other
Right.
districts. Definitely New York public schools are a different, have a different model and their rates are a lot lower. Also on tuition costs, we do have universal pre-K in Vermont, which means that even though we run our own pre-K programs in our schools, parents can choose to send their children up to any Vermont approved program, and we have to pay up to 10 hours a week. And that is based on the state set amount, which is currently approximately $3,800.
So Louis, just in regards to the interventionist that we don't have at Middletown Springs, will we potentially recoup any of that percentage? Back that you discussed earlier, like I think it was like 25 or 30%.
So the piece that's federally funded,
Right.
That is money that will just stay in the grant.
Okay,
And when you do fill that position, we can start tapping into that. We are allowed to carry that money forward into the following year. The piece that's locally funded,
right.
will be just savings that will roll into the surplus. I know when we look at surplus every year, that's one of the questions, where did the surplus come from?
Right.
And definitely over the last few years, definitely since COVID and stuff, we've had a lot of open positions SU wide, whether it be at the SU or in each of our schools. And so those definitely play into the reason why we have a surplus.
Okay. Would we potentially be able to raise the annual salary for that position? Only because I know that intervention now falls on.
CBA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Negotiated contracts.
okay. Thinking about trying to fill that position for next year.
Yeah, I mean, and Mary, there are a lot of very difficult to staff positions. I know we look
Right.
at behavioral specialists or interventionists, math and science. We create these positions, but sometimes it's very difficult to, it's one thing to create a position, to also to find someone that can fill that spot. And I think a lot of school districts and SUs are experiencing the same problem right now. It's just there's a shortage in terms of individuals. And I think that's where I talked to the regional superintendents about, can we do a better job of, consolidating or cooperating across, districts where we share resources. We talk about it, but when it comes time to actually go to action, that's when people start kind of pulling back a little bit.
Right.
I think there is more traction around those conversations now than there were, say, 2 or 3 years ago, or regionally. So. And, like I said, Louis led this, obviously, this is not, it was not meant to like, explain or making excuses. Obviously, just, the realities that as we sit down and we look at budgeting season, there are certain drivers that impact our budgets. And so we just, thought that last year, there were a lot of questions. And we thought this year, just start out, just do a better job of trying to explain, all these factors that, do weigh in, on budget, our budget, and have a major impact on this. So
I think it's great getting out in front instead of trying to do this after we've already put the ballot out, the budget out that we've approved and we're putting to the voters. This gives a lot of information.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really great information and just kind of breaks things down.
If there's no questions, we can move right into the budget.
Matt?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. Excuse me. Chris, you had mentioned something that was a new scenario I hadn't thought about, which was a minimum class size. And that's something maybe us as a board should discuss about, if it came to that, what would we do in that scenario? How would we approach that?
right, man. I think I think one as a GRCSU, and I think as local districts need to kind of work together on, because we do have a class size policy, an SU class size policy, and part of that is that we will establish a minimum, an optimal, and a maximum. We do have that in place from when we merged, but I think it's time that we take a look at that, because obviously what one district may say is a minimum may have a profound impact on Wells Springs. So I think that's where we have to look at, is there any flexibility with this? But I think really when you take a look at it, is that optimal class size? What do we really believe, whether it be that, K through 2 is 12 to 15, or, 4 through 12, you're looking at, 15 to 20, whatever that may be. I think that there's good discussions that we have to have around that, and how we set that, because, one of the things that will be scrutinized is the, minimum class size, as if we have class sizes of, 2 or 3 students, one building and 2 or 3 students in another building, I think, the community should be asking, is there a way for us to combine that, and put them together, if that makes sense from an education standpoint, so.
Yeah, and we actually had that scenario
Yep.
at the beginning of this school year with a kindergarten class in Middletown that was pretty small.
Yes,
And we were talking about potentially busing them to Wells, combining those classes, and in the end, we combined pre-K and first grade. But in a scenario where potentially, we're at capacity with teachers, we have to do some thinking about what we do there. If we have to let something go, and I don't know if we've, as a board, have discussed how we would do that, or how we would play through that scenario. But yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up too, from the presentation, was the facilities, is the PCB testing. So what I've heard is that the oldest schools were supposed to be inspected first, and ours still have not been inspected, and I'm just waiting for that cost to come through when we do get our schools inspected. And I understand that there's a allocation of money to remediate, but that it's actively being spent. So that's just concerning in terms of budgeting for the future.
Matt, I think it's very well said. I think, Senator Williams and Representative Pritchard can talk a little more about this, but you're right that there's not an infinite money pool for us to dip into. It's when that money goes away, it goes away. But yet, Middletown Wells still have yet to be tested. They're, on kind of the back end. And I know that other schools within our SU have been tested, have had, money been reimbursed for the testing as well as the mitigation remediation that is needed to be done. And that is a big question and concern that schools have yet to be tested, is when their time comes and all of a sudden if something needs to be done, there's no money, then does that fall back on the local district and the community to pay for that? And that was one of the things that the superintendents had warned about prior to this years ago, was like, just be careful about this. Well, it sounds good, but once you open this up, I mean, it's just, and it's I'll just stop there. I mean, I have a lot of opinions on this about, just some things, but I'll just keep it at that.
So Chris, you have no control over who and when, considering we're.
No,
Okay.
it's the state, so the Department of Environmental Conservation sets out a schedule. They have a schedule in place, and I know that they've actually pushed some things back. There was some of our schools in the SU were scheduled to have some mitigation done in their buildings and some remediation, and they had to pause because we just have to take care of the higher priority schools, and so then they had to reprioritize the queue, schools waiting. So it's, I understand the intent behind this. It sounded good, but it's really just it's a bit of a mess right now, to be honest. So, and my concern really is that the local communities and schools, we left to pick up the pieces at the end of this. So, and it goes back to what we've all said, Meredith, that because of luck of the draw, that Wells Springs may lose out because that's just when they were tested, so, and hopefully that's not the case, but, so, and I don't know if Senator, do you have anything to add to that, or,
No, it was a moving target.
Yeah.
I know a lot of principals wanted to just stop. And a lot of people said, no, the genie's out of the bottle. And so the education committee decided to work with AOE to keep it going. But what's the standard? And DEC, the state of Vermont standard is even higher than the federal level. So they're still grappling with that. They really don't know what they don't know either, so. And
Higher or
funding,
lower?
second funding.
So the,
So
the,
lower.
yeah, the
The
state,
higher lower is a little bit
yeah,
misleading.
right, so it's a much, well, now you got me confused there.
It's
So
stricter,
the-
so
the state-
Right,
usually stricter
it's much
than-
more strict than the EPA.
Yes.
so it's
Right,
lower.
and so I know I asked this question once to Representative DEC. I said, so let me get this straight. So a school could get shut down because they say it's that the PCB levels are too high for the students to be in the building, under current levels. And then if, say we shut the school down and then we sell it back to the town for $1, the town then says, okay, we're gonna reconvert this to housing. And then the same kids that were too dangerous for them to be in school can then move in and live in that same building and everything would be okay. I'm like, yeah, I guess if you look at it like that. And I think that's kind of where, for me, that's the absurdity of some of this is around these levels, because that federal level is much different than where the state level is at. And I don't know, like I said, I'm not a health expert. I've been saying this for 5 years through COVID, through this. I don't claim it to be, I just, but I think it's just real interesting to see how it's impacting our schools, our communities. And as you said, the decision to stop, how do you, when you're messaging that this is a health hazard, just to say stop, like, no, it's not, we're fine now, we'll move on. It's like, how do you do that? So.
We're not scheduled for testing till next year.
Correct. Right. So next summer, we'll start. So. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. Budget.
Okay. So looking at the budget, I met with Corey and Carol, and what you have in front of you in your packets was taking what we currently have, bringing back existing staffing, estimating tuition costs, looking at those key areas of our budget that were either underfunded or and I don't know that there were any cases, but overfunded. We look at actuals and what we've spent in the past. We try to bring back what we consider a level budget, and not level dollar wise, but level to what we currently have. And so I've highlighted on page 1 is the summary of changes, which just highlights any of the major changes that have occurred in this budget that are impacting dollar wise. So currently total expense is up by $342,000. It's a 5.6% increase. Education spending, which is the amount we have to raise in property taxes, which is total expense minus local revenues, is up by $176,000, which is 2.9%. And so the reason why education spending is up less than expense is because we have some surplus one-time money, such as surplus funds, as well as a refund from the supervisory union. The budget that you have in front of you tonight includes 11.9% health insurance increase, which is approximately $48,000 of the total increase. It includes the final approved SU budget assessments, as well as the decision that the board made, the SU board made to refund their prior year surplus in FY26, which is not typically what they've done. They've either refunded it in the year that it existed in or in the following year. So this is a change based on the board's request to give that to help offset any increases in FY26. Tuition expense is estimated to increase by $108,000. This is still an estimate. We haven't got rates for next year yet. We're just estimating an increase, as well as we're still working on student counts. What we do for student count, we look at who's in the schools now, and we just move everybody up a grade and kind of just guesstimate on the new students that are moving into 7th grade, and not taking into account any students moving in or out of town. So as the months go forward, we'll continue to update based on any changes that we know of. Any items that are highlighted in the budget are still pending. I know the big one is vocational tuition. That's still pending. We have not received any information on that yet. As far as the big driver on that is the FTE counts, which is based on the 6 semester rolling average, and we haven't gotten that data yet. HRA budget is in here at 100% liability, which is $64,000. There's a FY24 surplus for Well Springs is in here, and that's 158,000. As part of that piece, that's helping reduce the education spending. We did increase the repairs line budgets. They were at 35,000. There's 3 lines, one for Wells, one for Middletown. And then there's a combined Well Springs line that both schools can tap into, with prices of everything increasing and the number of projects that are on the 5-year plan. $35,000 doesn't go very far, especially considering that one of the repairs, or some of the repairs actually, are annual maintenance agreements with like Control Technologies or other companies that are just to maintain. That doesn't leave a lot of money for one-time repairs like roof repairs or HVAC repairs, stuff like that. So we increased all 3 lines from 35,000 to 50,000. So those are all the changes that are in the budget. Again, education spending, which is that's the key number that we'll be looking at, is up by 2.9%. The 2 other items that we talked about at the last meeting, that are under in that second category under the summary of changes are not currently in this budget, but I provided information for the board as requested.
Can you clarify that increase 0.5 to 1% is if we have the Boys and Girls Club?
We already have that. The Boys and Girls.
No, this is the Boys and Girls Club would cost 0.
That's
This
what
is
I
if we
thought,
run, this is if we
run our own
run
program.
our own program.
And so Louis, the surplus for last year was 158.
Correct.
Okay.
The SU assessment refund, is that,
So you can find that on the second page on the revenue. That's $67,000.
yeah, okay. I saw that and that's what I thought it was. It just says PY assessment. I wasn't sure if that was.
PY stands for prior year.
Amanda?
Louis, what is the cost of Boys and Girls program for Middletown and Wells that we're currently paying?
There's 0 cost for the Boys and Girls Club program. It's all parent pay and subsidy.
Okay, thank you.
We have funded them for about 6 weeks once they open a new program to help them become self-sustaining. So during that time, not all families start paying or completing the paperwork on a timely basis. So all of the programs that started during ESSER, we funded that during ESSER. We did fund Wells, or I'm not sorry, Middletown, while we still had ESSER. ESSER ended September 30th. So, but during the months of September and August, we did help fund that program to get up and running. But it usually takes about 6 weeks for them to be self-sustaining.
Do you know if they'll be able to continue and be in Wells in this budget, or if it's still looking like they will only be in Middletown?
So we did get an update as of last Friday. They are still looking for staffing. They do have at that time approximately 13 students that were potentially interested. They are looking for staffing.
Okay, thank you.
Middletown has been averaging 8 to 10 students. It was up a little bit during the soccer season, but as soon as soccer season ended, it's dropped back down to the 8 or 10.
So for the items in yellow that you're waiting for information on, do you have a guess on what those might increase by? I mean, looking at the year before, you know, I mean, could we, like, once you get that information, could we be looking at like another 20,000 or 30,000 increase to those lines?
I don't think it would be that significant.
Okay.
I mean, we have 2 factors that can change. There's the tuition factor, which generally goes up. And I think Stafford was talking about approximately a 4% increase. Is that accurate?
4.5%.
Okay. But the other factor, which has a larger impact, is the FTEs. So if your FTE count goes down, it can actually result in a decrease. And because that's based on 6 semester rolling average, you could have a large year dropping off and a smaller year this year. If you look at last year, it went up, the expense side went up approximately $6,000. So I don't think, based on your budget size, it's going to have a significant impact. But you could be looking between $5,000 and $10,000 as an increase, but you could be looking at a lot less as well. So.
Okay. On page 6, under Board of Education, the line SU purchase services, there was nothing for this year.
So that's just a shift to be more in line compliant with the changing requirements for the state. So if the audit expense and the legal services, if you see those, the audit went to 0 and legal services went down from 10 to 4. So that's just moving those expenses from a local expense to an SU purchase service. They were currently SU services to begin with, but we were, because we were paying for them at the SU, and then I was just doing a transfer and putting it directly to the audit and legal lines. But the state is requiring that we put it to this 591 sub account called SU purchase services. So it's just a shift. I did leave 4,000 in legal services for any direct services to Wellspring. So if it's a negotiations, those are all billed to the SU and then billed back. They'll be billed back as a purchase service. But if it's a Wellsprings legal issue that only pertains to Wellsprings, then it would be coded directly to that legal line.
All right. Then on page 7, under transportation, I just making an observation. I noticed transportation went down.
Yep.
Why is that? I thought it would go up.
So we receive approximately 45% back in transportation aid. And that does change from year to year based on the state appropriation. Our contracts went up significantly a couple of years ago, if you recall, and our transportation revenue has a 2-year lag. And so that lag is just catching up to us. And so our revenue is increasing, which is going to increase our net expense.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It is an estimate, but they don't, unfortunately, like some of the other revenues, they don't give us this, and actually we haven't even received this year's number. So I'm taking an estimate based on what we received last year.
Okay. And then, under plan operations, same page. So, I with the building repair lines, going up 15,000 each. Is this directly just related to like the 5-year plan? And the reason why I asked is I looked at, our year end last year, and we weren't really overspent overall last year on all
The
of it.
5-year plan has got some big things in it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my question is, that I wanted to get at is that, we have about 190 in capital maintenance funds.
Yeah.
And, so why not use those for some of these, why not use that for some of these items, keeping the budget lower? Just out of curiosity. And
I mean, that's definitely an option. I mean, this is something that we can review and play with a little bit. I know in a conversation I had with Corey, we were looking at control technologies, and control technologies annual maintenance is $15,000 a year. I believe that was the amount, which is almost half of the 35,000. So after you take that away, and then you have just all the small stuff, it doesn't leave you a lot for any amount toward this. Not even a large project, just a small or medium project. So the capital maintenance fund is better, I think, utilized for significant projects, like you have a boiler fail or a roof. But if there's a $10,000 or $15,000 project, it'd be best to maintain those smaller projects in our local budget.
yeah,
And there's just not a lot of room when you take into account some of our maintenance agreements.
When we started with the control technologies, this is my first budget.
it was back in 2019, 2020, I think.
And that's been a pretty standard monthly cost of almost.
Yeah, I don't recall the exact year. I know it's been a number of years that we've had that sizable maintenance agreement. And it grows every year, but
Right.
How much did you say it is?
It's almost $1,000 a month.
It's around 15,000 for the year. I will
2,000.
say it's slightly less than what it was last year. And we added on boiler maintenance to it this year.
So you, okay, so you added to it, because when we first had the contract, I remember seeing it and it sounded reasonable to me. I mean, I still have the old contract
Right.
and, but I mean, 15,000 a year is. I
Part
mean,
of that
that's-
also includes,
And that's just.
there's different controllers in the building that are outdated, so that also includes the cost. So within our contract, they replace, I can't remember whether it's 2 controllers a year. And so we've, I think that this cycle will end that, and then we should see it, I mean, it's a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
We should see it go down by a few thousand after that, because then we're up to date.
And this is just to have a contract with them.
So
It's
they
the-
come in and they do, you know, like the quarterly maintenance and things like that.
Quarterly, not monthly.
No, I have a whole
Okay.
schedule if you're interested in seeing
Yeah,
it.
well, I did actually email Scott, well, and he never, did respond. Because I did want to kind of see what it entailed.
Yep.
But, that just kind of surprises me. And I know that last year, you know, Scott advocated for the contract. He said it was pretty important, but, yeah, I guess I can see why you increased the lines, but I mean, we're paying, I mean, what kind of savings without a contract would there be, you know, like, I don't know, I just.
I can't answer that. It's not it's definitely not my expertise. I do rely on the facilities directors to sort of make those decisions. They're in the buildings on a daily basis and that's supposed to be their background.
Do we have anything comparable in Wells?
They also
They
have
also have
a
maintenance
full
agreement, yeah.
contract as well. Their system than ours.
Okay, so,
Yep.
and it's about the same price, less, okay.
No,
I know you mentioned that we didn't spend that much in FY, what is that, FY 24. But, and I think that is an important thing to note. But we should be utilizing it. I think our buildings need it. We should be utilizing that full repairs line every single year. And I know there are other schools that haven't, and I've had conversations with them as well. I think part of the problem is that they sort of keep money aside because you don't know what's gonna happen, you know, if something breaks down mid-year. And then when they try to schedule stuff, anyone who's trying to schedule stuff, even at your house, I mean, it's hard to find a contractor. Everybody's booked unless you schedule far in advance. So if you're scheduling, trying to schedule something the second half of the year, they may be working 6-7 months out and then you just kind of missed your window. So I know the conversation that I have with some facilities director is that to have stuff in your back pocket, like if you see that you're going to be having a large surplus at the end of the year in your repairs line, kind of have something that you can act on quickly, whether it be replacing flooring or that needs to be done, or smaller projects, so that you can get those done and that you can utilize that money in the year that we have it and not have it fall into the following year. I know a lot of those projects get done in the summer, but the problem with that is that it's a new budget year.
okay. Yeah, I just think, Amanda, before I say that, I didn't see your hand up. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you. Corey, do you know if that includes like the parts and labor and everything too, or if it just includes them coming?
Yes, so I mean, it includes routine maintenance. If they were to find something wrong that they have to fix, that's an additional cost.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I scrutinize all the control tech invoices
Yeah.
because, well, I'll just leave it at that.
It's expensive. It's one of those gigs, like even like the elevator maintenance ones, that there's limited people that do it. And so they can pretty much charge whatever they want. And if you look at the hourly rates, I mean, you're seeing hourly rates, $150, $120, $180 an hour. And that adds up quickly.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so, I did see one a couple years back. It was like $5,000 just to replace the hot water. Like, and then the invoice didn't even have a detail. It just said 5,000, replace hot water heater. And so, like, I understand it's expensive, but, I mean, at least a breakdown would be good, you know, to see, you know, but, No, what I was gonna say was, that makes sense. I mean, especially if these budget line items are being spent just for the service contracts. And is Wells the same, about 15,000 a year?
They have a service agreement. I'm not sure of the amount off the top of my head, but I know specifically, I had the conversation with Corey, so I know how much hers was, but I did not look at Wells, but that was just.
Carol's, she could probably speak to Wells.
Oh,
Yeah, and I don't have mine in front of me, but I know that that was one of the conversations we had when we met with Control Tech, is that ours is, I believe, a few $1,000s less than Middletown.
I think yours
And I
falls
can
below
pull that up.
10,000.
I think it did.
I think it's like
I'm-
significantly less.
Yeah, I think it's like $9,000, but I can get that information to you.
I'm curious, I mean, I understand that, having the money and, but I'm curious though too, is, as we're thinking about, and talking about consolidation, we still don't know how that's gonna go too. And just throwing that out there, what could change as far as the schools go, but, yeah. Amanda?
I have a question on page 5. Do you know what we're paying the nurses in other schools in our district? Is that $52,000 number kind of across the board?
Nurses fall under the CBA. They're a licensed position. So it's based on qualifications, education and experience.
Okay, I just wonder if, because we received a resignation and we don't know what applicants we might get, if we should adjust that number at all in this budget.
Well, Amanda, you're asking to maybe put some more in there because
I mean, I think it would be maybe beneficial, right? Like, do you think we're going to get somebody to apply at 52,000, or maybe we get somebody that is more qualified and maybe worth 70,000? I don't know. I don't know that answer. I just worry that we might.
But you're not
run into
advertising that amount. The amount that they get paid is based on their experience. So it would be our decision. In terms of budgeting, I could see why
Right.
I would add more to it.
I mean, I guess example is like if Jackie came back, not that I think she's going to, right? She has much more experience, so that wouldn't be a $50,000 position, I don't think.
Right.
So I don't expect her to apply again, but just kind of throwing out there that we don't know who might apply. So I don't know if it would be worth. I don't know. Whatever everybody else's thoughts are, that's just.
I mean, this is just an estimate. I mean, we have to do that for any new position. We estimate a total compensation. Salary is just a piece of it. The other piece is the benefits. And so as we talked about earlier, I mean, someone that has a single plan versus a family plan can have a significant impact. Typically when I'm estimating a new teacher, I'm estimating between $80,000 and $85,000. It could be 60 and it could be 120. We really don't know until you find that candidate. So, I mean, I think this is falling within that average estimate that I usually use for compensation.
At what point in the cycle would the candidate see the salary range?
so typically what we like to do is it's not like we try to hide it from them. I think it's we do a first round, and a lot of times candidates will ask before they even come in and say, "What's the salary?" So we'll share with them the pay scale that is in their back of our CBA, so they can see where they would fall. I know that always is confusing because each SC or district does things a little bit differently in terms of your experience and where they would fall. But if they don't ask to be ready for when we bring them back for a second interview, that's something which we say here is where you would be placed, just so ideally when someone comes back for a second interview, if they were to be offered the job or say that we'd like to recommend you to the board, that they would take it. It wouldn't just be a surprise. And I think but we've had some people who say yes and they just go back and they crunch the numbers and say they just can't make it work. They would love to do it. And we've had a lot of people, teachers, nurses who would love to do it, but to be honest, rather than like a medical center, we'll throw money at them, say, look, here's $15,000 to come on back. And we can't do that, obviously, because of just, our CBA and just, that's the reality of it. So
We have a new hire placement grid that all teachers are placed on based on experience. And And the master agreement is on the website with the pay scale.
Yep.
Amanda?
I think we pay Marianne much more than 52, if I'm correct, only because I'm sure she, like you said, she's had years of experience. But not in the district, but you know, I should have thought. I could be wrong, but
Amanda?
Sorry, I'm also still on page 5 with the counselor wages. Since we haven't filled that position in Wells yet, and we've struggled to find a candidate, in this budget, would it be appropriate to look at lowering that number and sharing the counselor we have between the schools, like other positions are shared, such as the nurse?
I mean, I think I would just speak as a parent, you know, obviously a board member as well, but I think, and Corey can correct me, Ms. Swain has a lot on her plate, is, you know, at our school. Right now, you know, I'm not sure if that plays into her caseload and her capability of serving each kid, if she had to travel, but I feel the same way like about our interventionist. You know, I wish we had an interventionist here. You know, you guys have it at Wells, so
Maybe that's something we can look at too, is sharing the interventionist with Middletown and sharing the counselor with Wells. While we're looking at all of this budget stuff, what of those positions can we make use of in both buildings so that we do have a more even playing field for all of our students?
right. And the only other thing, like I would say, you know, just substituting a few times that I did last year is that Miss Wayne, along with all the other teachers and staff, play many different roles. If a teacher is out, if someone's sick, you know, if Corey has many other tasks that she has to do, you know, so I don't think that she's just designated to her counselor role each and every day. So I wouldn't want to put more strain on our schools, but I understand what you're saying.
I feel,
And I don't know the answer. I just, you know, if we share other positions, I just didn't know if it was worth looking at sharing what we already have. And if we can't fill the position anyway, and it's already almost the end of, you know, middle of November, then maybe it's the time to look at utilizing what we have more appropriately. And that would affect this budget as well, I guess. And not to take from one school or take from another, but you know, we share the nurse, for example, and when the nurse isn't there, we have a medical designee that covers on the days they're not there. So maybe if we shared the counselor, we have a designee that's available when the counselor isn't there. Wells hasn't had one at all since last year, and they had somebody filling in. So I think we could share for a couple days a week. I don't know, just my thoughts.
so I'm going to speak, and maybe Carol, I'm speaking for you, so you can yell at me. I sort of feel like the needs of our kids are great enough that it's worth keeping in there. If we are unable to fill the position, then I think looking at creative solutions would be great. But I do think there's enough need in both buildings to keep a counselor. It's not just, I mean, our guidance counselors, you know, they're meeting with kids as needed. They're certainly pushing into classrooms and delivering lessons. But, you know, then there's a whole other end that a lot of times they're assisting with behaviors. So they've kind of become hybrid counselors, behavior. I don't want to call them behavior interventionists because that's not really their role, but they're certainly supporting classroom teachers with that. So I would advocate keeping both positions and then figuring out creative solutions if we can't find someone. I also think timing. I think that's the issue that we had with the interventionist, was timing of when positions were posted, you know, really hurt us.
Yeah, I don't remember the month that we lost our counselor in Wells, but I think it might have been, it was early that they were left and we couldn't even fill a substitute position. So I just wonder how long we would wait to do that. That's all.
Carol?
Yeah, so we have been without a counselor since the very end of February of last year. And I felt like the way that we were organized within the school with setting up a support system for students, that it worked out very well for the remainder of the year. I know going into the year, we did not have a lot of candidates. We pulled down the posting because we really didn't have candidates coming in that were qualified, and reposted. And again, it's not something that people are jumping at. And Corey and I have been talking kind of about creative ways of how we can do this moving forward. In response to the interventionist question, our interventionist, we could use more time versus less time. So I think that the understanding of what that position entails is very similar to what the counseling position entails, and it's very different in each school. So I think it's something that Corey and I've talked about, that we continue to talk about. How can we do it? But they're really tricky to get people to apply for the positions.
Well, and I'd also say, Carol, I mean, I know you've been without someone for February. When that was posted in February, it was long-term. It was only until the end of the school year. A counselor for the current school year was not posted until the summer. So that's not even our typical timeline for hiring.
Correct.
So we were at a disadvantage from the start.
Yes.
And we see very little movement with professional positions during the school year. So professional meaning anyone that's on the teacher's contract. So nurses, teachers, interventionists, counselors. Very, very, very few of them leave mid-year and go somewhere else or take positions in mid-year. So the opportunity to really find those positions will be very early spring, late winter, when people are looking for the following school year before they have signed their contracts.
And we just had that conversation about posting the positions that we need to post for next year, and saying that we're going to get those out as soon as we can, for the very reasons that everybody's saying.
Well, and as Louis said, there's a science to this too, because if you post too early, then it gets buried and then it gets lost in the shuffle. I mean, we do know that the reality is that over, winter break, over the holidays, people start looking, people start reflecting upon, what's out there. And so, you really want to have a post really out, and late December is probably the earliest you'd want to have, because really that February window is probably the sweet spot, because that's when the move will have, like, we get to March. But when you start in April, May, things slow down dramatically. Then you're very lucky if you find a candidate in late May or June. That's just the reality of the hiring window in education. So you will find some people, if you're lucky enough to find a long-term, it's someone who has decided maybe just take some time off when it come back. But I know Carol has even said that she has had individuals who've expressed interest for next year, but they can't, because of their current obligations. So she does have people who may be some candidates. So there are individuals out there that are interested, but that also is, if we would wait and not post till, say, May, we would lose those individuals because they'll be snatched up, because people are looking for jobs. And, as we know, there are a lot of openings out there in our schools and districts. So.
And I know that Ms. Rosso is resigning 2025 end of the year.
She is effective the end of this year.
Right,
She
so-
will be retiring.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, she's critical to our school, so I'm sure.
We are
Corey has
posting that as well.
Yeah. On her.
Okay, well, I think, as far as the budget goes, if no one has any other question, I think we do need to address the highlights at the end, that the information that was provided, if we want to keep these things or add these things, I should say, to the budget, as far as the after school and the additional language teacher. Language teacher was a full FTE, right?
That's what I put it based on. The board would need to decide if that was something you were going to move forward with, and what FTE you would want that position at.
And Eric, I know that at the last board meeting, I do believe Matt had asked me to reach out to see, the question was if our students at Middle Tower Falls would be behind other kids by not having this. And so I reached out to our regional superintendents around this, and Rutland Town has one Spanish teacher for their K-8 right now. Outside of Mill River, and Mill River in one of their schools has a community grant funded foreign language Bennington, Rutland, which is down south, Rutland City, Southwest Vermont, Slate Valley, and all the rest of our schools in GSSU. We do not offer foreign language in K through 6. And even when they did offer it, they couldn't find anyone. That's been another issue too. So even in the high school setting, that Rutland City does begin offering that in 7th grade. Southwest Vermont, does offer it in 7th grade as well. But just so you can have comparables, so you can see that where we're at with foreign language. And so.
I think, Louis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the last foreign language teacher that we had was a shared position between both schools.
Correct.
And even that shared position was a 0.4.
Correct.
Okay, so I think that, well, what does that equate to?
It was 1 day a week.
1 day a week,
And
right?
yes.
So that might be.
So Carol and I have talked about this being brought up at the last board meeting, and just what, the impact that this could have on students. And I think that one of our big concerns is adding a language teacher, whether it's part-time or full-time, is another 40-minute special, which is another 40 minutes away from academic time, when our students probably don't need less academic time and need more support in academics. So we would have a concern about adding on, and it's not that we don't value or find the value in extracurricular activities. We absolutely do. But it's additional time outside of the classroom. And so if we were to add language, we sort of feel like something else would have to give. Do we take away health, which we added this year? Do we look at changing the library model, things such as that? But we feel that it would not be in the best interest of our students to just continue to add more on top of them and pull away from academics.
So I know that my Chris and Caroline get PE twice a week, and that's also separate from outside,
There are state requirements about how much physical activity kids have to have. And so that's a combination of PE as well as recess time.
Okay, great. So not that I want to take away PE by any means or lessen it, but would that be something that we could maybe once a week and then add the language, or would that be under the requirements of?
I would have to look at what the state requirements are for physical education, but I think typically it's offered twice a week because you need to offer it that many times to meet the requirements by the state.
Right.
Then you also have the concern of, so now you're dropping up, in my building, it's a 0.4 PE, Carol's, we've got, I guess he's 0.4 PE and then he's 0.6 health, social, emotional. But now you're dropping those positions, right? So, does the 0.4 here then say, well, it's only a 0.2, I'm out? And then if you're, do you find a part-time language teacher? It's difficult.
Right.
There was discussion about a full-time language teacher. What do you do with that language teacher when they're not teaching those 3 days a week?
Right. So if we look back a few years back, I can imagine that we didn't have that health teacher, but we were able to incorporate that language in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Health would fall under, health is a requirement by the state. So that would then fall on classroom teachers.
Okay. So that position was recently filled.
The health position.
Yeah.
So we had looked at when Carol had hired a PE teacher at health, we had proposed to the board, rather than a 0.6, which can be a difficult or not a 0.6, but a 0.4, which is a difficult position to fill. Why don't we look at full time? We can share in between the two buildings for health and social emotional and kind of support our counselors that way too.
Remember that. Okay, Matt?
Yeah, excuse me. I appreciate that insight, both from Chris and Corey. So that's helpful to know. I'm just curious. It sounds based off of other, previous meetings that the health teacher is working out really well and he's able to add supports in different areas. Just curious, per his contract, if we go into a second year with him, is he then tenured? And no.
So we don't have tenure in Vermont, but within their first 2 years, they're considered a probationary teacher.
Yeah.
But Louis and Chris can correct me. Should we decide that a position, should we decide that the position should no longer be a full-time position, we only need a 0.6, it would be considered a RIF. and a repost and he would have first rights to it, or she, whoever the individual was?
There are, and I'm not gonna quote because I think I don't want to misquote, but yes, if we would have to riff or repost, change position, there are certain requirements that we're held to with regard to this. And so, I mean, so it's really up to the board in terms of what you would like to do with these positions. I think what the conversation really, we're looking more around FTEs, and I think less about positions sometimes. I think that's where, I've said this to other boards, and Louis and I talked about this, but I think sometimes we get into the weeds so much about how we're going to, point forward will be this. I think sometimes, just say, look, Corey and Carol, you have 20 FTEs, you then have to figure out how you manage the building with that. And, there has to be that flexibility. Corey and Carol know how to best support their students. I mean, when you look at the counselor, Corey and Carol could tell you the impact of sharing accounts across two buildings. I know that I've been down at Wells, Lisa's been down there a lot, and I can tell you that main office is busy. And everybody says, oh, a small school, there's not a lot to do. They've never been in a small school. Small schools are hectic, and there's a lot of strain that's put on resources. So when Wells is looking without this, whether it be a 0.4 health teacher, or if you reduce that, it does put strain somewhere else. And we look at, from CBA, Corey and Carol have to look at, specialist teachers also to satisfy requirements around, prep time for other staff as well. And so by reducing that, that may impact this. So there's a lot of moving parts when you start messing with, FTEs or things on those lines. So I think the big discussion really was around whether or not the board wanted to explore looking at adding that 1.0 language teacher to this board. If that's what the board would like to do, then we would look at a way of doing that. But like I said, that is additional cost. So
Yeah, I think based off of the feedback, I would sort of reverse my opinion on adding a language teacher based on what I heard today.
Yeah, I'm not so comfortable adding 1.4% to the budget for this, at least at this time. Anyone else want to comment? Amanda?
I would agree. I would think we should not add a language teacher at this time, especially if that would mean losing the new health position or something else. But I do have a question about the $50,000 increase with after school. Is that, and maybe you don't know the answer, but are we not getting staffing with Boys and Girls Club because they pay a different amount than we would pay? So if we brought back after school program, we might be able to staff it? Or are we not staffing with Boys and Girls Club because why? Like, I'm concerned that we don't have a program in Wells. So if $50,000 gets us one, I'm in favor of that.
So when we were running our after-school program in-house, we were paying $20 an hour to the coordinator and $15 an hour to the staff that were working. Boys and Girls Club is paying above those rates. If we were,
So, Amanda, and I said this before, and I don't think anyone in this room, even the staff that are online are gonna, there is a need for after-school programming, summer programming. I think that's one of the things that, having moved here 6 years ago, been one of the things that just the lack of resources for working families. And I know with the economy that you need, sometimes, you have dual income households where both parents have to work, and you look at the cost of housing and in the state of Vermont, it's just through the roof and everything else. And so there is that need, but once again, it's being put back upon the schools to do this. And our staff really are contracted from like 7:30 to, or 7:45 to 3:15. Those are their hours. And, to, like I said, to ask them then to say, hey, then on top of this, work 3 more hours on a long day, when some of these individuals say, hey, I have a kid who I don't have childcare for as well. Who's going to watch my kid while I stay here? So I think the numbers are don't always wash out. I think the problem with staffing really is just the fact that we have staff work very hard during the course of the day and because of their own personal reasons also have to say, I have to go and take care of. But like I said, I think there's a need for this. And so we looked at how do we provide Boys and Girls Club that also took a lot of lifting off of Carol and Corey, because then they were responsible for, maintaining a school per se now till 5 or 6 o'clock and through those lines. So we understand that we're trying to provide that. I said through Boys and Girls Club, but the issue right now is trying to find staff that, could do it. And I said, I don't know if, throwing money at the problem, but that's still going to be a cost. And so in terms of, but that goes back to, is it the school or the school district's responsibility to budget for this, or really should it be on a parent pay basis, where if we want to increase rates of pay, then, we have to put that back on the individuals that are going to be using that service. I think that there's a conversation that we have to have.
Yeah, and I don't think that's an unfair request. I don't think parents should be able to leave their kids for free all the time. I'm not really in favor of there not being a parent pay, but there just hasn't been in the past. But I also wonder if, maybe instead of calling it after school program or something, we offer a paid position to have someone do a club. Maybe someone wants to do dance or karate or something after school that at least gives the parents a couple days a week that kids could attend, or maybe rocketry. Maybe we pay for rocketry, something that kids could still attend a couple days a week. That's a paid position that people might be more apt to do a couple times a week instead of a couple times a year. Maybe. I don't know. I think we can explore with it a bit. I think that we have options, maybe, if we just looked at spending it a different way. I don't know, like robotics club, for example, it's been a huge hit. In fact, such a huge hit that there's kids that couldn't attend because we didn't have enough staff. But maybe if we posted, hey, we want robotics club 2 days a week and we want to pay you X number of dollars to do it until 5 o'clock, then maybe those people would be willing to do it more and then we could accommodate more kids. I don't know that that's a yes, but I think if we're looking at if $50,000 is the number, can we spread that out in any way for even, I don't know, maybe I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts? Am I reaching for the stars? I just think that we have options. I think that we expect too many volunteers.
Amanda, don't take this the wrong way or disrespectful in any means. Looking at the stipends that we're paying right here for some coaches and basketball and stuff like that, Wells used to have this amazing group called Volunteers. We busted our butts and we raised thousands of dollars. They don't have that now because they don't have a leader to step in there and really get the parents together. I was a board member. I was a PTO, head PTO. I did a lot of it. We raised thousands of dollars. I don't have the time right now. I do plan on getting back into it when my life changes a little bit in another year or so when I leave Rutland. But you're there. You're more in the school. You have kids there. Be that leader. You can do that. Get the parents, get a volunteer, start doing some fundraising.
Yeah, unfortunately, I work 40 plus hours a week, though, because I have to pay for my kids when they're home. So I'm not there. I just leave my kids there.
Okay, Amanda, I did that too. I'm not going to, I'm not bragging or anything, but I was a dairy farmer and I had my kids there. I coached Little League. I did after school. I did PTO. I did everything. I work 75 hours to 80 hours a week now. I mean, this is tough to make it. It can be done. It's good, but you're not the one that I'm telling you to do it. But just try to see if you can find those parents that do have that spare time and get a group together. Start fundraising. It's not that hard to do. Just get some ideas and roll with it. If you need a hand, give me a call. I can help out a little bit when I can. But drag those parents in there that just want the free things, but you can get them to get a little help in there and do some stuff. But fundraising is something that can be done and you can pay for these things to give your kids. And everybody can benefit if everybody will get together and start working together.
All right, so in regards to having this in the budget, so it was 0.5% to 1%, $50,000.
Yeah, I mean, I just threw out some numbers because it's really depending on how much you want to charge the parents and how much you want to subsidize the program. I mean, it could be anywhere from zero if you want to charge them the full cost to $50,000 if you're charging them only a piece of the cost. So, I mean, and I based it on what we were paying for rates, which we know are low. If we look at increasing those rates, it's going to increase the cost. I mean, I think the problems that Boys and Girls Club is having with hiring is the same problems we have had in the past and the same problems we will have if we bring this back in-house. And it's not a one-time program. Once you find a staff member, that doesn't solve the issue forever because they can leave 3 weeks later. And as we see with a lot of our support staff, they come and go pretty rapidly, some of them. And so this is another thing that needs to be managed by our administrators, or the Boys and Girls Club, whoever's running this program, throughout the year as people are coming and going. So once we start a program and that there is a chance that if that person leaves or if one of those people, then we'd have to then put that program on hold if we don't have staff members.
I remember that conversation and so, yeah, with the Boys and Girls Club, they're charging the parents, we're not paying anything for it. And I did notice the child care tax in there too, 7,500. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so.
Back there.
Yeah, and just like really quickly, what my kids do after school, with Boys and Girls here. And I'm always so thankful. And so when I talked to Michaela, and she's one of the directors, she just said really quickly, it's hard to find someone from 3 to 5:30, only Monday through Friday, and then say if the kids have a week and a half off for winter or, oh, summer hits and now you're out of a job. So just like our support staff, like Lewis had mentioned, it's kind of a hard, it's a hard position to staff considering those, they can't even do more hours if they wanted to. It's just that 3 to 5:30, Monday through Friday, if school is open. So just, her thoughts, but
It's kind of a look into last year
right.
and how things went last year. I mean, we made it work last year and it was like by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah.
We started off the program as a licensed program. We had a staff member that left in October-ish, because for the reason that she needed more hours. We had another staff member who left in December, and because working all day followed by another 3 hours was no longer sustainable. And then we had a staff member that went out on medical leave with maybe 2 months left of school, and we were left scrambling. And so I had staff who were willing to step up. I was filling in. We wound up having to, we had to move away from our licensed program and move to a single skills program, which required, you would think less work, but it required more work because there are requirements with a single skills program. So I then was going home and planning what was going to happen in after school because I didn't have anybody that was qualified running the program that was able to do that. So it was a lot of work. There were times where it took away from the school day because we were scrambling, trying to figure out who was going to fill in. There were a lot of times where we had to cancel on parents. So then it became unpredictable. Right. And I think having an unpredictable program is worse than having no program.
Carol.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that was very similar to what happened with us. And again, it's left on the administration to fill in when you have somebody who calls and says they can't be there. And we did have a lot of changeover in staff. And we were lucky enough at one point in the year where I had a teacher who actually kind of needed that. So she stepped in. But again, then she left, she went out on maternity leave. And I would say the last probably 5 or 6 weeks of the year last year, we were just up and down with not having consistent staffing. And if there weren't people there, then I had to step in and be that person there. And that's a lot when it happens 3 to 4 times a week.
Okay.
Do you think it's worth looking at if there's a program in Middletown currently, say Middletown is able to get one more staff member, maybe they can't, but say they can. And so that makes their number of, I think it's 12 that they're allowed to have. Is that correct, Lewis? Boys and Girls Club can have 12 people with 2.
I can't answer
Okay,
that
so-
with
No,
confidence.
it's 26. It's a 1-to-13 ratio, I believe.
So could we then use some of this money to bring well students to the Middletown program if needed? I hear from a lot of parents that it's a hardship, and I understand that everything's a hardship, right? Like nobody can afford anything right now. Cost of groceries is insane, cost of living is insane, and everyone's getting paid the same amount. I get that. But parents have to work, and many of these parents have 8 to 5 jobs. And I know it, I hear it, I get it, I see it. I just wonder if it's an option to bring them to Middletown if Middletown can sustain that number of students, but Wells can't staff it. Can we bring Wells to Middletown?
And so are you saying then Wells parents would have to pick up in Middletown?
Yeah, but they would have to pick up in Middletown, but I would think that for those families that it's enough of a hardship driving another 15 minutes to get their student rather than losing $300 or $400 or $500 in a paycheck because they have to leave work early to get their child, that 15-minute ride might not matter to them. I've just heard from a lot of parents that like they're taking turns where dad gets out early one week, mom gets out early one week. Teenagers aren't participating in extracurricular activities because they have to get their younger siblings off the bus. I've just heard a lot of scenarios that I don't think picking their kids up in Middletown would be a deal breaker for some of these families.
But we'd have to bus them there.
Right. We already turn around at the end of East Wells Road. So it would be 10 more minutes. Our bus goes right to the end of East Wells Road, turns around not far from Phil's Mill.
Is it dropping students off at home once it turns around?
I would have to clarify, but it goes down to the end of East Wells and then it comes back and goes up Sawmill and Endless Brook, which is like my road, and there's very few students on that bus.
But so then you would be asking all those students to take the drive to Middletown and then back to their homes?
No, because they drop off. They drop off all the way down there. I think the last drop off would be down by Sawmill Hill.
Oh, okay.
So, or not Sawmill Hill, but
Lamb Hill.
Middleton, by Phil's Mill.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And if they would continue on, but they drop off
Gotcha.
my road before they go on to that.
And my kids are the last ones off
Can we
the
go
bus.
back and work through this and come back in December with
Mhm.
some logistics, trying to figure it out?
Yeah.
On the fly.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. All right, so yeah, if that's something you want to do some more information or bring some more.
I think that the board would like us to consider using some of this money for transportation. I think we have to go back and work with Carol and Corey and
Yeah,
talk with Betcha and just to see what that would look like. And then come back in December and say, here's what it may look like, and then have the board use that for consideration.
yeah, I mean, I see potential issues, just because, if you don't have people sign up for it because they don't want to go to Middletown Springs, but I guess as far as the budget goes and at least some kind of cost analysis for this concept, just what do people think?
Well, we also need to hire another person, right?
I don't know.
I think it would depend on how many gets
Yeah.
registered.
That's-
I mean, the other thing to consider too is so it's how many people, but it's also what our space is licensed for. So there is going to be a max capacity based on whatever the state regulations are by square foot for the license.
Okay, well,
Students have
Yeah.
to sign up initially for the entire year, and then they'll kind of ebb and flow as they need to come in.
I'm not sure how boys and girls
Okay,
ran theirs.
gotcha.
all right, so I mean,
It might be unreachable. I don't know if we could do another survey like we did to see if Boys and Girls Club was needed and say, hey, would you guys want to send your students to Middletown? And maybe everybody says no. And my idea was a complete waste of time. Based on the amount of people I've heard from, I just think it's worth looking at.
So,
That's all.
my question is, are we still trying to get the after school program going as well? So
We are
you're still
currently, yes.
actively trying to do this, and how many staff members do they need?
Right now they're
One,
looking
two,
for one.
just one. So you still, if you have that same, you're still gonna need one person for this. So, I mean, I think it's a good concept, but, if this is the alternative, some parents may not want to do it. Now they may want to back out because now they have to travel. But I think if the program is still trying to move forward in Wells, and just leave it as is. That's my opinion. How does everyone else feel? So we can get some kind of consensus on the after school program. And again, we're talking about whether or not we want to add this to the budget or not, like realistically.
But we don't even know what we're adding to the budget. So I think what Chris and Louis were saying is they could come back at the next meeting with some actual round numbers, which would give us a little more idea of if it is something we want to add to the budget.
Okay.
And then we have to do, I don't know. Yeah.
All right.
If we'll have people who want to do it.
Anyone else? Final thoughts? And then I didn't hear anything as far as the teacher position. I think a few people were fine with not having that in the budget.
The language position?
Yeah, it is. So I'm just kind of looking for some consensus. So no language teacher for, I know it's not in there, but just to confirm that. And then, all right. So any other changes to the budget? Anything you'd like to see or not see for December? Do you think we'll have some of the other final numbers in December?
We should have a better estimate for the vocational, yes, but we should have the December 1st letter. I anticipate those are the only two pieces that we have. We won't have any of the other state data.
Okay. All right. All right. So no one else has any other final thoughts or input on the budget? We'll move on. Thank you. All right. We're on to personnel. So we have contract recommendations. These are informational only. Did anyone have any questions about the contract recommendations? Extracurricular. No questions. All right. And then we have one resignation, retiring at the end of FY25, Joy Ray. Is there a motion to no, we don't need to do anything for retirement, right? It was a resignation. What's that?
It's retirement, yeah. I was talking to myself, sorry.
Okay, superintendent's report.
I'll be more than happy to take any questions. A lot of this, after 8 o'clock, and I've already been through a lot of this information. So if you have any questions about anything in here, I'll be more than happy to answer that. But I just want to real quick say thank you to Eric Mopper, and he went to the VSBA, VSA workshop, represented Wells Springs 2 days. So I just want to thank him for his participation up there. It was a well-attended event. So just want to publicly say thank you for representing the board in that event.
Thank you. No questions? Pretty thick report. You guys sure? No, thank you. All right, principals reports.
Keep it super short.
Yeah, if you want.
So we hosted, I don't even remember the date now. But we hosted our first annual, what we're hoping to be our first annual middle school choice fair. We held it here and bussed Wells over. We had 8 middle schools in attendance. Patricia Swain, our counselor, really did a lot of the outreach to those schools, inviting them. Every single school that we invited, she basically hounded them until they said yes. So it was really great to have all of the schools here, to have all of the kids here. We had a few parents, community members that came as well. And the kids, the format was that each school was asked to just give a 5 to 10 minute overview to everyone of just some of the highlights of what their school had to offer. And then the kids had the opportunity to walk around to different tables. They got to collect swag. They got to ask questions. They were given packets to bring home to their parents. So I think that overall, we feel it was a really great success. We have a few things that we'll probably tweak for future years, but but I think it was a great first go of it. Kids were incredibly respectful, and they were asked to sit, you know, when you ask 8 schools to talk for 5 to 10 minutes, it's a really long time for kids to sit. They did amazing. I'm just going to give a shout out to a couple of our 3rd graders. Our 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Regan, is really focusing on back fluency with her kids. She's using a program called Rocket Math, and when kids master their math facts, which is a 3rd grade standard, they need to know by memorization. Their math facts, all products of 2 one-digit numbers, so that'd be up to 9 times 9. They have to know, she's making them know up to 12 times 12. And when they master that, they have become a multiplication master. They get their picture taken with our wizard. They get a certificate. They get their name shouted out on the announcements, and they get this really cool t-shirt that they get to proudly sport. So every single kid has been making progress on this, which has been really, really exciting. Just update on our physical plant. We have had an issue with a new gas sensor that's been installed by Countryside Alarms. It's just been randomly going off. We've had the fire department visit us a few times before we could isolate what the problem was. Turns out that we have a breaker that's overloaded, or a circuit that's overloaded. We've known about this for a while, but it hasn't been too much of an issue because it hasn't triggered anything other than us having to reset it. But now with the alarm going off, it's a bigger issue. So we have Slate Valley Electric. They came to visit us last week, took a look at it, sent us a quote, and we are looking at having work done over December break to hopefully fix that problem so that it stops going off. It's a pretty, I think I'm on the phone with Countryside almost daily at this point, telling them, please don't call the fire department. So, you know, other things, I think things always pop up. We did have a septic issue in our special education bathroom that we're going to have to dig into a little bit more. And this may be one of those more expensive projects that we're going to have to fix. We have some pretty old pipes. We had a crushed pipe that was fixed over the summer, but the whole section wasn't fixed, just the crushed portion. So the part that starts in the building and now meets the new pipe is really old and rusted. And so things are getting stuck in there. And then finally, the last thing I want to put out there is Friday night. This Friday night, we have our 6th grade spaghetti dinner from 5 o'clock to 7. Our 5th and 6th grade students will serve you dinner if you choose to come out to the school, or they also do takeout. So please come out and support. It supports our 6th graders class trip to Boston.
Curious, how much do you guys fundraise and how much do you get out of that usually?
The spaghetti dinner? Oh boy. I don't know off the top of my head. Actually, Michelle Parker probably knows. She's on the call. Michelle would probably know.
Yeah, roughly about $2,000.
How much?
About 2,000.
About 2,000 just for spaghetti dinner?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
They do very well. I mean, who doesn't want 6th graders serving them dinner?
Right. What time do you start?
5 o'clock to 7 o'clock.
I only have, okay.
Any questions?
I'm able to call in your order.
I
have it ready to go.
I do overtime on Fridays. It's my mandatory. overtime.
855-5155. Shameless,
But I should be able to make it before 7.
Any questions for Corey? Okay, Carol?
I'm just going to add a couple of things that I hadn't. I was going to thank Middletown for holding the first annual Choice Fair. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there, but I have heard good things, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing where we're going to go with that. So thank you, Corey, for hosting that this year. Our book fair this year just ended yesterday, and our PTO and Lisa Madison and all of the volunteers that were there, they raised enough money and sold enough books that we're able to keep the larger fair, not just a tabletop. We are still going to be able to have the larger book fair, which is great. We did start with first celebration of students and their math fact fluency, and anyone who has changed a level was recognized at a school meeting on yesterday, actually on Tuesday. And there were several students who have moved up more than one since we've begun this. So it's kind of exciting. And I think they're getting really excited to see where they're going to be able to make their moves by the end of the year. I did note, I did not put in my report the subbing issues that we do have. So I will add that back in for next month's meeting, but I have been keeping track, and we have had, of the 52 days so far this year, 36 of those days, we have not been fully staffed. So It's about 69% of the time the positions are not filled, but I will put that back in like I did last year. And I think that's about it.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions? All right. And facility report. George, you wanted to add anything to this, or did anyone have any questions?
Well, that's it. Facilities report is something new. I'm looking at the format, and we meet quarterly, right before a board meeting. So you would probably be getting our unapproved minutes at the following month's meeting. And then I would do some kind of a facility update, what happened since that time. And I don't want to regurgitate what the principals are telling you, but I think everything that you've heard shows you how critical it is to have a facilities director, because this is not having one has fallen on Carol and Corey and Chris and Lewis over here. And, they don't need any extra work, honestly. And I will note, if you haven't seen before, that we are interviewing tomorrow. So anyway, that's how this would work. The content of the report would be the unapproved minutes, which were in your packet. And again, an update and looking at it today, I don't know if you noticed, but we're not growing seedless grapes. And I put current maintenance projects. Spell check. But it does tell you, again, how things, progress, and it's an ongoing thing, the daily things that they have to deal with, and the maintenance projects that are ongoing. So that update, and then the minutes again would be there. And I was thinking of maybe adding the staffing, what our staffing is at each school also, just so the board is aware of, who we have available. And this would be also a time for the board or the principals or anyone to offer future agenda items for the next meeting, which because of the timing is going to be in December. So if you don't have anything tonight, shoot it to me on an email and I'll gladly add it to the agenda. And
So George, I know I spoke with Corey and Carol. I think there may be some additions to the 5-year plan that we can talk about in December and to roll back out, because I know there's some projects that we're going to identify, and Carol, that may not have been on here. So we just want to make sure this is as updated as possible. So we'll work on that. We'll get that to you, and then we can discuss that in December. So
yeah, and I apologize if I didn't mention that part of this monthly report would be taking a look at the 5-year plans. And, we were talking about budgeting for the future before, and these are rough numbers, but if you look at the combined totals, and this was part of your package also, but we're looking in fiscal 27 at over 128,000 for maintenance, for big items. The following year, over 181,000, and fiscal 29, over 200,000. So reviewing this periodically is going to allow us to budget for that and to get ready for it. I did have a question on, I think it was on Carol's report, where you were going out for a quote for HVAC. Is that related to the furnace replacement that was supposed to happen down there that we're starting to budget for?
Yeah, and that was something that Scott was kind of doing, so I haven't really done anything with it, to be honest, and I haven't been there. So
But they are connected. That's my question.
I believe, yeah, yes.
Okay.
And it was my understanding that it's applied for that grant that costs us $128,000.
Right.
You're waiting to find out how much would be covered of that $128,000.
Yes.
I think that's a huge chunk of it too.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I did have a question on the facilities, the Grand Plan of Oak Village School. The blinds, the safety concern with the hanging strings. The cost of $7,000. Now, back in 2021, we spent $9,400 replacing blinds. And I'm just wondering if these replacements are replacing those. So I'm kind of curious about that, or is it just replacing the ones that weren't replaced?
I believe it's just the ones that were not replaced, and many of those are off of the first floor
Okay.
because the work was done on the first floor.
Okay. Yeah, I remember seeing it. It did say first floor on there.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to just make sure that we weren't throwing new money after old. All right. And okay, so yeah, I mean, no, this is great. Anyone have any questions for George? I see a lot of additional stuff, so I'm definitely interested in what's going on in the facilities world because some of this stuff is new. And all right.
And then I did try, last thing I'll say is I did try to contact you guys, but I know you're all busy, the administration and Lewis about, what's going on with this. Because you said if we just make a time to do that, on a quarterly basis, that would be great. And then we're giving you guys the up-to-date information as best we can. And then we can do planning accordingly. If you do have any questions anytime, shoot me an email, please.
Amanda?
Sorry, I have a question. George, when you guys picked like the timing for things, there's some things like staining the playground fence that's low priority. That's happening for FY25 or has already happened for FY25. And then there's tree trimming and landscaping and stuff that's listed as medium to high. That's not scheduled until later. Is that just because of seasonal or timing that people could do it? Or
Amanda, this was done by Scott, did the 5-year plan. So I think that's one of the things we talked about is that now with Scott, moving on and, hopefully if things work out on Thursday, we'll be working with the new facilities director and maybe just taking a look at the scheduling of some of these items. What makes sense. There are some of the proverbial low hanging fruit that we could knock out. But some of the bigger ticket items, how do we prioritize certain things? So that'd just be something that Carol and Corey, who much more aware of what's going on in their buildings than I am, would be able to identify that. So, but yeah, so that's what we said we would be. And maybe George, we can find a time you can just come down in one afternoon and just sit in
Okay.
whether in Milltown, I'll come down, Carol can come up and just, we'll hash that out before the summer meeting.
Okay.
As well, so.
Okay. Yeah. Let's set a date on.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
All right. Moving on to my report. If anyone had any questions about that, I did just want to add with the AOE Listen and Learn tour. George was there. Great to see George and
A lot of
Senator Williams, as I mentioned earlier. If you haven't seen the latest VSBA, there is another public online session coming up.
What day was that?
It's on December 10th.
December 10th. Thank you. So there's another opportunity for the Listen and Learn tour. And yeah. So if you didn't have any questions, we'll move on. We'll move on to new business, anticipated board seat openings. So we have 2 seats up, George and Sue. And yeah, so I know George, you're rerunning again.
Yes.
And Sue, are you?
Undecided.
Undecided? Okay. And that's fine. I think the reason for this is that if you were decided, that way people would know and the board would know that there's a potential vacant seat coming up. But, you know, anyone can still run. So.
Want to get rid of me that bad? I can be a much bigger pain in your ass, I promise.
Go ahead.
No pressure.
All right. So that's all we have for today. Our next meeting is on December 11th. Any agenda items? Email myself or Chris, Amanda.
Do we have an executive session tonight?
Nope.
Did you call for any public comment second time?
No, I didn't. Thank you, George. No, I jumped.
Yes, he
right-
did
right
the
now.
first time.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so public comment. Did anyone have any public comment tonight? Oh, Tammy, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to let you guys know that the MWA is planning their walkthrough event for the holidays for the Wells Village kids on Friday, December 13th from 6 to 7:30. So it's a little different this year. It's going to be on a Friday evening instead of a Saturday. And I've been working with the, I think Lauren, to get everything situated, and there'll be something to go in your bulletin or whatever, but I just wanted to let you guys know as well.
All right, thank you. Patricia Sweeney.
Hi, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the conversation about sharing the counselors, just to give some insight or some things to think about. One of the best things about working in a small school is wearing a lot of hats, but that's also one of the most crucial things about working in a small school. And just to give some insight into other things that I do, like I greet the kids every morning outside, I sub in the office if needed, I sub for special teachers, classroom teachers, especially with helping sub in pre-K. It's not like a lot of trainings that you have to do, like 9-hour trainings. So we are already limited with the amount of people that can be in our pre-K room as subs. And just to touch a little bit on best interest of students, even though we're both small schools, we have kids that come with a lot of significant trauma. And I know personally from my experience, for some of my kids, when I first started, it took for some kids up to a year or more to get comfortable even coming to talk to me as a counselor, whether that was because of past experiences or losing trust with past people. So it really can take a long time for our kids to really warm up to the idea. Even when I was part-time my first year, I was in the building 2.5 days a week. And Mr. Beal, our old principal, had to fill in for me, and it really spread the job thin. And a lot of my days, there's kids that I don't plan on seeing, but sometimes things come up. Maybe a kid comes in having a bad morning because something happened at home, something unexpected happened during the day. There's crisis or behaviors. And so bringing a new person into another school part-time would also take a very long time for those kids to warm up and to build that trust. So just wanted to put some thought into there just to give you guys some things to think about.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
And just really quickly to touch on what Ms. Swain said, I'm pretty sure that in your report, the pre-K substitution rate filled was 0% for Middleton.
It would also be 0 for Wells. I do not believe Middletown and Wells have any staff who meet the requirements for pre-K. So we are always filling within, and
Yeah, that's what Ms. Swain
Okay. All right. So we already covered future dates and agenda items. So a motion would be in order to adjourn. All right. Motion by Mary. Motion to adjourn at 8:30. All those in favor, please say aye. Motion carries unanimously. Meeting adjourned.